The sound of shattering glass ripped through the night like a thunderclap, tearing apart the peace of the small apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. Ryan Whitaker jolted awake, the solid frame of the 45-year-old man springing from the bed like a steel coil. His sharp, grey eyes scanned the thick darkness, his right hand instinctively reaching under the pillow where he still kept the old carbon dagger from his years as a CIA operative. The biting winter cold crept through the fogged-up window pane, carrying the distant smell of exhaust from the empty street. But what made his heart pound was the sound of strange, heavy footsteps rummaging through the living room below. The stench of sweat and cheap cigarettes hit his nostrils. A warning straight from hell. "Ryan? What's going on?" whispered his wife, Ava, her voice trembling beside him. She gripped his arm tightly, her messy brown hair hiding her pale face in the faint moonlight filtering through the thin curtains. Ryan silenced her with a sharp look, his lips pressed into a hard line. Their two children, 16-year-old Noah, fast asleep in the next room with rock music blasting in his headphones, and 8-year-old Harper with her big, smiling eyes could not wake up. He had once been the Grey Ghost, an expert in assassination and intelligence in the world's deadliest places, from the deserts of Syria to the dark streets of Baghdad. 2 decades ago, he had spared a major target, an arms trafficker, which led to a hasty retirement to build a normal life in this windy city. Now, working as a maintenance man for a small construction company on the shores of Lake Michigan, he thought he had buried his past under the dust of time. But tonight, that past was kicking down his door. Ryan slid onto the cold hardwood floor, his bare feet making no sound, moving like a phantom through the shadows. He grabbed an old baseball bat from the corner of the room, not the ideal weapon, but enough to mislead an enemy if needed. In the silvery moonlight seeping through the curtains, he saw 2 hazy black figures, a burly man with a venomous snake tattoo winding across the back of his right hand, and a skinny woman sweeping a flashlight frantically through their drawers. They were tearing everything apart. The clanging of metal on metal, a defiant challenge. The flashlight beam glinting off familiar family items. His and Ava's wedding photo, Harper's toy box. Ryan was about to grab his phone to call the police, but the man spun around and pointed a worn-out handgun at him, the kind without real bullets. He recognized instantly from its rounded shape. "Freeze. Old man. Hand over the money. Unless you want your wife and kids to see blood all over this floor." The man's voice was hoarse, thick with a heavy Mexican accent, making Ryan freeze for a second. The snake tattoo, the symbol of the Los Lobos Cartel, a notorious drug organization controlling the border, flashed in the flashlight's beam. A curse from the Mexican desert. He could take them down in 3 seconds. A strike to the man's throat to cut off his air, break the woman's arm, then choke her out with his elbow. The skills from 20 years as the Grey Ghost were still there, etched into his muscle memory. But Noah and Harper, the risk was too great. Even a fake gunshot could wake the kids, turning the apartment into a war zone. Ryan let the phone drop to the floor with a soft thud, his voice unnaturally calm, as if negotiating with a wild animal. "The money's in a box on the kitchen shelf. Take it. But don't touch my kids' rooms. They're innocent." They snickered, a dry laugh mixing with the sound of them rummaging through the cash box filled with nothing but loose change and old utility bills, then snatched the cheap watch from his wrist. Its glass cracked from a recent car repair. The woman stuffed it into the pocket of her ripped jeans and turned to leave through the back door, their long shadows stretching across the moonlit floor. Suddenly, Noah burst out from the dark hallway, his young face flushed with anger, his messy hair falling over grey eyes just like his father's. "Let go of my dad's stuff. You're pieces of trash." The 16-year-old boy, tall and lanky with a teenager's build, grappled with the woman, throwing clumsy punches. She shoved him to the floor, grabbing his collar, her nails tearing the fabric. Ryan lunged like a lightning bolt, swinging the baseball bat lightly, not hard enough to kill, just enough to knock them back a few steps. The sound of wood hitting flesh, a dry thud. "Stop! Take everything. Just don't hurt anyone." Ava ran out of the bedroom, her voice shaking like an autumn leaf, her long hair a mess, clutching a sobbing Harper who had woken up in her little bed. The girl's eyes glistening with tears in the moonlight, cursing in broken Spanish. They shoved Noah down again with a kick to his hip, then fled through the back door, vanishing into the cold night of suburban Chicago, where the Lake Michigan wind howled through the bare trees. The door slammed shut. Ryan bolted all 3 iron locks, leaning his back against the old wooden wall, gasping for breath as cold sweat trickled down his spine. His blood was boiling like lava. He could track them right now. Dive into the darkness and end this with the edge of his blade. But he chose restraint for his family. It was the oath he'd made to himself when he retired. Never let the past bloody the future. The next morning, the air in the apartment felt as heavy as winter fog. Weak sunlight streamed through the frosted window, casting a yellow glow on the chipped wooden kitchen table. Ava made coffee in the old pot, the bitter aroma filling the air, but her brown eyes were red with resentment as she looked at Ryan sitting silently at the table. "What were you doing?" "Ryan, letting them push our son around. You were a special operative, weren't you? I saw how you held that bat. That's not how a normal dad handles one." Noah glared at his father from the opposite chair, biting into a piece of toast with irritation. Dad was a coward. I could have fought them myself. Why'd you let them take everything? Harper, sitting on his lap with her chubby cheeks still stained with tears, hugged his neck tightly. "Are you okay? Daddy, they were mean? Like the monsters in the movies." Ryan was silent, pushing away his untouched breakfast, a pain as sharp as a knife twisting in his gut. He remembered nights in Baghdad, where he'd eliminated targets without blinking, blood staining the hot sand under the desert moon. Now, in his own son's eyes, he was just a useless dad. The neighbors whispered behind their low wooden fences, "Glad it wasn't my house. I'd have shown them what's what with my hunting rifle." Ava's brother, who worked security at Ryan's construction company, pressed a Glock into his hand. "Keep this, man. Protect her and the kids." Ryan took it, hiding it deep under the garage floor next to a rusty toolbox where he used to fix Harper's bicycle. At the construction site in downtown Chicago, the sound of drills echoed between the grey skyscrapers under a grey sky. Ryan locked himself in a makeshift changing room and opened a secret communication device, a small, encrypted phone. The raspy voice of Logan Pierce, his old CIA colleague who was now a security consultant, came through the speaker. "Heard you had a break-in. 2 Mexicans. Fake gun?" Ryan nodded into the damp, stale air. "That's right. I didn't make a move because of the kids." Logan let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Your past is a ticking time bomb." "Ryan, that snake tattoo Los Lobos Cartel. Be careful. They have a wide network. All day." Ryan endured the sarcastic remarks from his co-workers on the site, their loud laughter drowning out the hammering. "Hey, Whitaker, you fight off some robbers. Why didn't you use that baseball bat like in the movies?" A quiet rage burned in his chest like hot coals. That evening, Harper sobbed at the dinner table under the dim yellow pendant light. Her silver star bracelet, a birthday gift from her late grandmother, was gone, taken in the robbery. "It's gone. Daddy." It sparkled just like the stars in the sky. The 8-year-old rubbed her eyes, tears streaming down her rosy cheeks. Ryan hugged his daughter tightly, and the rage exploded like a volcano, shattering the shell of normalcy he had tried so hard to maintain. He drove his old pickup truck to a nursing home on the outskirts of Chicago, where his father, Grayson Whitaker, a 70-year-old man whose body was still as solid as the special operative he once was, sat reading a newspaper under the bare winter trees. Time to get back in the game. Zone, Grayson said immediately, his blue-gray eyes glinting as he handed Ryan an old bag, fake documents, a thick roll of cash, and a polished Beretta pistol. I know you haven't forgotten how to hold one of these. Ryan nodded, his resolve as hard as tempered steel. He went to a tattoo parlor in a dark alley in downtown Chicago, the air thick with the smell of fresh ink and spicy Cuban cigars. The owner, a fat man with a fierce tiger tattooed across his chest, sneered when Ryan sketched a venomous snake on a crumpled piece of paper. Looking for someone? Go play somewhere else, buddy. But an old veteran sitting in the corner, with a long white beard and eyes clouded with age, recognized a faint operative's mark on Ryan's arm. Thanks for your service, my friend. I know that tattoo. They locked the heavy iron door of the shop and whispered under the flickering blue neon light. The robbers were an immigrant couple from Mexico, Rico and Carla, living in the East Side Chicago slums, surviving day to day on the black market. Ryan nodded, his rage subsiding slightly but still simmering like an underground fire. He drove to the rundown neighborhood, where grey apartment buildings were covered in cartel graffiti on cracked brick walls. The stench of sewage and coal smoke, thick under the dim yellow streetlights. Kicking open a rotting wooden door, Ryan used the butt of his gun to knock Rico to the floor the moment he opened it. The sound of bone meeting metal a dry crack. Give me back the silver bracelet. Carla, trembling, emerged from a dark inner room and handed back his watch with pale hands. But the bracelet had been sold on the black market for medicine. Ryan cocked the Beretta, the cold barrel pressed against Rico's forehead. But then the faint cry of a 3-year-old child came from an old bed. The boy lay there, his face pale, an IV drip in his arm, leukemia eating away at him. Model? Ryan squeezed the trigger, his knuckles white. But he paused when he saw the desperation in Carla's eyes. We just need the money for medicine. Please, spare our child. He lowered the gun, his voice a razor's edge. Stop, before the Los Lobos cartel swallows you and that kid whole. Leaving the slum, rage built inside him like a black storm. Ryan boarded the last subway train, his mind reeling with CIA memories, cartel hunts on the Mexican border, blood soaking into desert sand, crimson under the scorching sun. But on the train, a group of drunk thugs got on, harassing a young woman sitting alone with crude, vulgar words. Hey, gorgeous. Want to come with me? We'll have some fun tonight. Huh? One of them roared with laughter, his hand grabbing the girl's skirt. Her face went pale under the train's green neon glow. Ryan stood up, his voice as cold as Lake Michigan ice. Stop. Right now. They turned to him, sneering, their breath thick with beer. Old man, you got a death wish. Get lost before I smash your face in. The first one charged, swinging a punch like a heavy sledgehammer. Ryan sidestepped smoothly, delivering a low kick to the man's knee. A sickening crack echoed through the empty train car as the man collapsed with a scream of pain. The second one pulled a dagger from his pocket, slashing down with a blade that glinted in the light. Ryan blocked with a muscled forearm, twisting the guy's wrist in a CIA joint lock. The knife clattered onto the cold metal floor. Then he drove an uppercut into his jaw, sending a spray of blood against the graffiti-covered wall. The third, the tallest one, with a wolf tattoo on his neck, threw a straight punch into Ryan's stomach. The force made him gasp, but he gritted his teeth through the pain and smashed his elbow into the guy's face. Breaking his nose, blood pooled on the floor, his groans echoing like a dying animal. The girl whispered, trembling. Thank you. Ryan gave a curt nod and stepped off at the last station as the winter wind whipped his face. But he accidentally left behind his train pass, stained with fresh blood. A fatal mistake. And one of them was the younger brother of Raul Mendoza, the notorious leader of the Los Lobos cartel in Mexico, who controlled billions of dollars in drugs and human trafficking across the border. Big trouble was coming. Fast as a hurricane. Would Ryan be able to maintain his ordinary facade? Or would he have to become the grey ghost again, plunging into a vortex of blood and fire to protect the ones he loved? The sallow yellow streetlights lashed across Ryan Whitaker's bruised face as he stepped off the last subway train in the Chicago suburbs. The winter wind was a blade, cutting to the bone, carrying the smell of exhaust and garbage from dark alleys where homeless figures huddled under old newspapers. The fight on the train was still fresh in his mind, the heavy thud of punches, the crunch of breaking bone. The blood on his old wool sleeve now dried to a dark brown crust, and the young woman's trembling whisper, "Thank you," before she vanished into the night. Ryan tightened his grip on the carbon dagger hidden in his worn leather jacket, whispering to himself through a white puff of breath, "You can't let your emotions run the show, Ryan. Not now." But the anger from the home invasion, from Harper's missing Silver Star bracelet, had pushed him across the fragile line between a normal father and the killer he used to be. The blood-stained train pass, a stupid mistake, left behind in the chaos, was now like a curse that could lead the cartel wolves right to his doorstep. He drove his old pickup truck back to the apartment, its engine rumbling hoarsely down the deserted street. The headlights swept across rows of bare winter trees, casting long, twisted shadows like demonic fingers. The cut on his right arm oozed warm blood through his shirt, stinging every time he gripped the steering wheel. But Ryan gritted his teeth and wiped it hastily with a napkin from the glove compartment. "It's just a scratch," he told himself. But deep down, his CIA instincts tingled like an electric current. This was no random accident. The venomous snake tattoo on the first robber's arm, the symbol of Los Lobos, still haunted him, coiling like a challenge from the distant Mexican desert. The next morning, the small apartment was filled with an atmosphere as thick as fog over Lake Michigan. The bitter smell of coffee drifting from the old wooden kitchen. Ava stood by a skillet of slightly burnt fried eggs, her hand trembling as she looked at the new bruise on Ryan's cheek and the long-sleeved shirt covering the cut on his arm. "Where were you last night? This wound, is it from working late at the construction site? Or are you hiding something from me again?" Her voice was a mix of deep-seated worry and suspicion, her deep brown eyes studying him like they had when they first met 18 years ago. In the drizzling rain at a bar by the lake, Ryan kissed her forehead lightly, hiding the sharp pain from the cut with a forced smile, just a scrape with some equipment. "Honey, don't worry. I'm fine." But Ava wasn't easily fooled. She squeezed his hand under the table, her fingers cold. "I know you're strong, Ryan. But since the robbery, you've changed." Noah's noticed it, too. Noah, sitting at the table with the tinny sound of rap music leaking from his headphones, glared at his father over the phone. He was scrolling through TikTok on, "Dad's hiding something again. Just like last night. I saw you. Dad, you could have taken them. Why did you hold back? Or are you scared?" The 16-year-old boy, tall and lanky with messy hair, obscuring grey eyes as sharp as his father's, spoke with a voice full of challenge and curiosity. From her high chair, Harper chirped, waving a plastic spoon covered in milk. "Did you find my bracelet, Daddy? The one that sparkles like a star? You promised." Ryan nodded, his gut twisting as if stabbed with a needle. The image of his daughter rubbing her teary eyes last night still haunting him. He hugged Harper, breathing in the familiar scent of baby formula in her hair, but his mind was already on the snake tattoo, the only lead he hadn't fully explored. After a hasty breakfast filled with the clinking of spoons against bowls, Ryan drove into downtown Chicago, where the streets bustled with colorful graffiti on mottled red brick walls. The blare of car horns mixing with the smell of grilled meat from street carts and the damp air from the lake. The first tattoo parlor, Shadow Serpent Inc., was tucked into a dark alley between grey skyscrapers, its green neon sign blinking like a demon's eye, warning strangers away. The air inside was heavy with the acrid smell of fresh ink and the sickly sweet scent of vape smoke. The buzz of a tattoo needle droning from a hidden corner like the heartbeat of a sleeping beast. The owner, a burly man with a fiery dragon tattoo coiling around his neck and muscular arms, looked up from his sketch pad. "What do you want?" "Old man? A tattoo? Or are you just going to stand there and look pretty?" Ryan laid out a crumpled piece of paper with a drawing of the coiling venomous snake. "I'm looking for the man with this on his arm. Last night, they robbed my house in the suburbs. I need a name." The owner smirked, his yellowed teeth flashing under the neon light, and gestured for 3 heavily built cronies to emerge from the back room like hounds. "We got a difficult customer here. Take care of him before he screws things up." The first man charged like a drunken bull, swinging a fist at Ryan's face with enough force to splinter wood. Ryan sidestepped smoothly, fast as a gust of wind off the lake, and drove his elbow straight into the man's temple. A dry groan of pain escaped him as he staggered and crashed through a glass counter, shards glittering on the floor. The second pulled an iron chain from his belt, whipping it over Ryan's head with a whoosh. But he ducked low, hooking a kick into the man's knee. A crack like a dry branch snapping echoed as he crumpled with a scream that carried out into the dark alley. The third, the tallest one with a wolf tattoo on his bicep, threw a hook from behind Ryan, the force making the air whistle. Ryan spun around, blocking with a rock-solid forearm, then twisted the man's wrist in a CIA joint lock he learned in training at Fort Bragg. The chain clattered onto the damp concrete floor. He drove a straight punch into his jaw, and blood splattered against the colorful graffiti of snakes and dragons as the man collapsed, his eyes rolling back in his head. The owner's face went pale. He backed away behind the splintered wooden counter, his hand trembling as he reached for a gun hidden beneath it. "Stop! Who the hell are you?" Ryan rolled up his long shirt sleeve, revealing the faint mark of a CIA operative on his bicep, a secret tattoo that only former colleagues or veterans would recognize, its lines twisting like Morse code under the calloused skin. "Veteran, I just want information. I don't want any more bloodshed." An old veteran sitting in the corner of the shop, with a tangled white beard and eyes clouded by smoke, nodded slowly from his cracked leather chair. "Thank you for your service, friend. I know that snake tattoo. It's the mark of the Los Lobos cartel from Mexico. They use it to brand their low-level guys." They locked the shop's heavy iron door with a clang that echoed down the alley and whispered under the flickering green neon light. Rico and Carla were a desperate immigrant couple from Mexico, living in the East Side Chicago slum, committing petty robberies to scrape together money for their 3-year-old son's leukemia treatment. "They aren't monsters," the old man said, his voice hoarse with age. "Just victims of the cartel. But if you dig any deeper, Los Lobos will be digging your grave." Ryan nodded, his anger subsiding slightly, like a fire doused with water. But it wasn't extinguished. Compassion made him hesitate, but his killer instinct whispered that forgiveness could be a fatal mistake. He drove his pickup to the dilapidated East Side neighborhood, where crumbling grey apartment buildings were covered in the cartel's Los Lobos graffiti on cracked brick walls. The stench of sewage and charcoal smoke hung heavy in the air under the flickering yellow streetlights. Banging on a rotting wooden door with a dry thud, Ryan used the butt of his Beretta to knock Rico down as he opened it. The burly man fell to the damp concrete floor with a thud, blood trickling from his nose. "The silver star bracelet, give it back before I snap your neck." Carla scrambled out from a dark inner room, trembling, her pale hands shaking as she handed him his cheap watch. But the bracelet had already been sold on the black market to buy chemotherapy drugs. A weak, whimpering cry came from an old bed covered in torn sheets. Their 3-year-old son lay there, his face as pale as wax. An IV drip slowly feeding from an expensive bottle of medicine beside him. Ryan chambered around in his Beretta, the cold metal of the barrel pressed against Rico's forehead, glinting under the weak ceiling light. His finger, pale, tightened on the trigger. But when he saw Carla's eyes, a mother's silent, desperate plea, he stopped, lowering the gun with a soft metallic click. "I'm letting you go this time," Ryan growled, swallowing his bitter rage. "But stop. Before Los Lobos feeds your son to the stray dogs," leaving the slum with the slam of a door behind him, the rage building like a black storm in his chest. Ryan boarded a late-night subway train. His mind spun with memories of the CIA, nights hunting cartels on the Mexican border, blood staining the desert sand crimson under the scorching sun, the groans of victims echoing like a curse. But on the train, a group of drunk thugs appeared, harassing a young woman sitting alone with crude, vulgar words. Tugging at her shirt in the middle of the empty car, Ryan stood up, intervening again, and this time, he completely unleashed, taking them down in under 10 seconds with the brutal efficiency of an elite killer. Fists, kicks, snapping limbs, blood smearing the cold metal floor of the train. The girl ran, but his blood-soaked train card fell to the floor again, a deadly clue leading straight to Raul Mendoza. The notorious enforcer for the Los Lobos cartel. Had a small act of justice just ignited a global nightmare that would consume his entire family? Ryan Whitaker leaned against the living room wall of his apartment, the Chicago moonlight filtering through a cracked window, stretching his shadow across the varnished wood floor like a long, jagged scar. The question of his past still haunted him like a whisper from hell. He had triggered a deadly manhunt, all for Harper's silver bracelet and a strange girl on a train. "I have to prepare," Ryan thought to himself, his hand tightening around the encrypted phone in the pocket of his worn leather jacket. His thumb stroking the cold metal casing. The knife cut from the train was still oozing warm blood through the makeshift bandage, stinging with every movement. But the pain was just a reminder. His killer instinct was awake, and it demanded blood to be satisfied. The next morning, the apartment kitchen was warm with the smell of crisp toast and bitter black coffee brewing in an old pot. But the air was as heavy as the early morning fog over Lake Michigan. Ava stood by the frying pan, her brown hair in a loose ponytail. But her eyes were red with worry as she looked at the new bruise on Ryan's arm. "What else are you hiding?" "That wound from last night. It's not from the construction site. I've seen you change, Ryan. Ever since the robbery, you're like a different person." Her voice trembled, her hand gripping the wooden spoon so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ryan hugged her from behind, inhaling the familiar scent of soap on his wife's neck, his voice low but hiding the storm inside. "It's just work. Honey, I need to see my father today." "Don't worry. I'll be back soon." Noah glared at his dad from the chipped wooden table, taking an angry bite of his toast. "Dad's always got secrets. I know you could do something, but you just pretend to be a normal dad." Harper squealed from her high chair, waving a plastic spoon sticky with honey. "Daddy, are you coming with me? Tell me a hero story?" Ryan kissed his daughter's chubby cheek, a knife twisting in his gut, then left the house with a slam of the door, the winter wind whipping his face like a reminder of the storm about to hit from Mexico. He drove his old pickup through the suburban Chicago streets, the engine rumbling hoarsely over the rough, lightly snow-dusted pavement, to the nursing home on the shore of Lake Michigan, where leafless oak trees stood silent under a gray sky. Grayson Whitaker was sitting and playing chess under the bare branches of a tree, his silver hair falling over his sharp, blue-gray eyes. His 70-year-old frame was still solid, still radiating the air of the Special Forces soldier he once was. "Son, you've kicked the hornet's nest," Grayson said as soon as Ryan sat down on the creaking wooden bench, his old voice raspy from old cigars. Ryan briefly told him about the subway, the snake tattoo, and the bloody card. "Raul Mendoza's little brother is in the hospital. They're going to hunt me." Grayson nodded slowly, his eyes flashing like a blade. "Raul? He's a monster for Los Lobos. Controls the drug flow from the Mexican border all the way to the Chicago ports. You need weapons, don't you?" He led Ryan down to the nursing home's basement, unlocking a secret storeroom behind an old bookshelf, a gleaming Glock 19 pistol, a razor-sharp carbon knife, homemade smoke grenades, and a few compact claymore mines. "I was Special Forces in Nam. You know that. Now, I'll help you get your edge back." Ryan took them, a warmth mixed with a deep, gnawing guilt filling him. "You're safe here. Dad, I'll handle this. I won't let them touch Ava and the kids." Grayson clapped his son on the shoulder, his calloused hand covered in the scars of war. "Remember your family. They're the reason you retired 2 decades ago. Don't let the past swallow your future." Back at the apartment, Ryan hid the weapons in the garage under a rusty toolbox where he used to fix Harper's bicycle, then opened a secret communication device, connecting him to Logan Pierce. Logan's hoarse voice crackled from the small speaker, fighting against the sound of the lake, wind whistling through a crack in the door. "Ryan, you're crazy. Raul's brother is in the hospital because you beat him on the train. They're hacking the bloody train card. Your file is compromised." Ryan froze her, CIA memories flooding back like a sharp blade. Cartel raids in Mexico City, blood on the cobblestone streets in the drizzling rain, the groans of victims echoing like a curse. "I was just saving an innocent person. Now what?" Logan gave a dry, humorless laugh. "In 24 hours, killers are hitting Chicago. Raul has an army AK-47 seconds and grenades from the border. You need a plan." Ryan disconnected, his chest heavy as lead. He had to warn his family without panicking them, one last lie before the blood began to flow. In the cramped living room, under the dim yellow light of the hanging lamp, Ryan gathered his family. "We're in danger. I used to be a CIA operative, specializing in assassination and intelligence. Now, enemies from my past are coming back because of the robbery in the subway." Ava's face went pale, her hands tightening around a sleepy-eyed Harper. "You hid this from me for all these years? All those nights you were wide awake. That's why?" Noah's eyes widened in astonishment, his voice trembling. "You're a real spy? Like in a James Bond movie?" Harper burst into tears, hugging her father's leg. "You'll protect me, Daddy. Right? Don't let the monsters come." Ryan knelt down, pulling them all into a hug, his voice low but firm. "I will handle this. Stay in the house. Triple lock the doors. And trust me, this is the last time." He bought a burner phone from a night market by the lake, traded for C4 from an old smuggler contact, and then rented an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago, an old place with rusted machinery standing like decaying sentinels, thick with dust under a roof full of holes. Ryan turned it into a fortress of death, stringing razor wire around the entrance, planting claymore mines under the cracked concrete floor, setting a timed bomb in an old oil drum, and checking the hidden cameras from his phone. That night, Ryan stormed the cartel's bar, El Lobo, on Chicago's south side. The air was thick with the sharp smell of tequila and heavy Cuban cigar smoke, the sound of mariachi music blaring from old speakers. He slipped through the back door, past tattooed men sitting around beer-stained wooden tables, and dodged the security cameras by remotely cutting the wires with a small pair of pliers. In the back room where they kept the dirty money, brown leather suitcases were stacked like mountains of filthy cash from drugs and human trafficking. Ryan poured gasoline from a canister hidden in his jacket, the strong smell filling his nostrils like a curse. Then lit it with a Zippo engraved with Ava's name. The flames erupted violently, devouring tens of millions of dollars. Black smoke billowing up like a dragon from hell. The crackling of burning paper blending with the shrill wail of the alarm. Let Raoul know. This is just the beginning. Ryan whispered amidst the chaotic screams, escaping through the back door as the blazing inferno illuminated his scarred face. In his stronghold in Mexico City, Raul Mendoza, tall with a mess of jet black hair. His face, a roadmap of scars from hell. His eyes bloodshot under a crystal chandelier, slammed his fist on a walnut table, shattering it as an assistant tremblingly delivered the news. The safe house in Chicago is on fire. The intruder burned all the suitcases. Raul growled, his voice as hoarse as a starving wolf's. Find that son of a bitch. Hack the goddamn bloodstained train card. I want everything on him. A female assistant's fingers clattered on a laptop, her face pale. His name is Ryan Whitaker. Lives in the Chicago suburbs. His file is hidden behind a CIA firewall. Raoul slammed his fist on the table again, blood seeping from his knuckles. Send the killers now. 10 elite men, armed with AK-47 seconds and grenades. Bring him to me alive. I'll tear him apart myself. The kill team flew to Chicago on a private jet, their suitcases full of weapons, ready to spill blood on American soil. Ryan drove the pickup as bait down the I-94 expressway at midnight. The engines roar, drowning out the sound of the lake wind whistling through the broken glass. The city's neon lights blurring past like ghostly streaks. 2 Cartel SUVs tailed him from a distance, their headlights glaring like devil's eyes. Machine guns firing from the windows, bullets shattered the rearview mirror, sending shards of glass raining down like metal confetti. Ryan swerved sharply onto an off-ramp, throwing a smoke grenade behind him. Thick white smoke blanketed the highway in a hellish fog. One SUV crashed into a light pole, exploding into a blazing fireball that lit up the dark night with flying shrapnel. The second one stayed on his tail, shooting out the pickup's rear tire. The truck swerved, the tire screeching on the damp pavement. Ryan floored it, hurtling into a dark undercity tunnel, the echo of gunfire reverberating like the laughter of death. He escaped by a hair's breadth, blood from his old wound seeping out, staining the steering wheel red, his heart pounding with fury. Back at the abandoned warehouse, Ryan checked the last trap under the moonlight filtering through the perforated corrugated iron roof, the musty smell of old machine oil and gasoline fumes hanging thick in the air. He called Grayson. Dad, they're coming. You ready? Grayson chuckled over the phone. This old dog's still got bite. Son, I'm bringing the shotgun. Logan confirmed. I've got your back from a distance. Just like the old days in Kabul. Ryan looked out the broken window, the wind whistling like death's whisper. He remembered Ava hugging him this morning. Noah's suspicion, Harper's trust. They were all the reason he was fighting. But could he win against Raul and Los Lobos? Or would his family pay the price for the fire he just started? Darkness was falling, and Ryan was ready to greet it with blood. Darkness was falling, and Ryan Whitaker was ready to welcome it, his operative sixth sense tingling under his skin like a high-voltage current as he stood motionless in the kitchen of his small apartment, his hand gripping a sharp kitchen knife from the old drawer. His cold grey eyes glued to the sleek black SUV, parked a few dozen meters away on the empty suburban Chicago street. Pale moonlight streamed through the fogged-up window, casting long, twisting shadows on the varnished wood floor. The distant sound of a dog barking mingled with the night wind whistling through the door, cracks like a deathly whisper. His family was hidden in the basement, The steel door locked with a code. Only he knew. Ava held a crying, sleepy Harper, while Noah mumbled, "Dad's going to win," in a trembling voice. "Don't call the cops." Ryan whispered to Ava before closing the heavy door. "Trust me. Honey, this is my fight." She nodded, her brown eyes red and brimming with tears. "Don't you die." "Ryan, for the kids." Noah stared at his father, his eyes wide with a mix of terror and admiration. "Who are you?" "Really?" Ryan didn't answer. Gliding silently up to the first floor, turning their ordinary home into a death maze with tripwires rigged from the coffee maker and glass jars filled with sharp nails hidden under the rugs. The sound of shattering glass from the back door cut through the silence like a scythe. 4 black-clad assassins stormed in like phantoms from hell, suppressed pistols in hand, flashlight beams cutting erratically through the pitch-black living room with a cold, white light. They moved with the professional coordination of cartel mercenaries. 2 split off to check the kitchen and hallway, while 2 climbed the iron staircase, which creaked under their heavy footsteps. Ryan flipped the main breaker from the electrical box hidden behind the fridge. Darkness instantly swallowed everything, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the smell of sweat and gunpowder from their clothes. A flashlight beam briefly illuminated a family photo on the wooden wall, Ryan smiling beside Harper at a summer park. Now a tragic reminder amidst the impending smell of blood. He lunged from behind the refrigerator like a lightning bolt. Plunging the kitchen knife straight into the first man's neck, the blade slid through flesh with a sickening ease, and blood spurted out like a black stream in the moonlight filtering through the door, the body thudding heavily onto the white-tiled floor. Eyes wide in a sudden, violent death, the second man spun around, firing his suppressor with a deep times thump, thump, times the bullet grazed Ryan's shoulder, tearing through his cotton shirt, warm blood immediately seeping out and staining the fabric red. He rolled over the chipped wooden kitchen counter, grabbed an old stool, and slammed it into the man's head. The sound of his skull cracking echoed in the darkness, and brain matter splattered across the polished stainless steel refrigerator, the thick, metallic smell mingling with the cold coffee in a cup on the table. From upstairs, the thud of heavy footsteps echoed like war drums. Ryan sprinted up the dark staircase, his breath ragged, and activated the first trap, a tripwire rigged to a ceiling fan. When the assassin stepped on it, a powerful electric current shot through him like a whip. He convulsed violently, his body shaking uncontrollably, and groaned as he tumbled from the top step, his neck snapping with a dry crack on the wooden floor below. The last man drew a Mexican dagger from his belt, its blade glinting in the moonlight from the hallway window, and slashed at Ryan's chest with a sharp whoosh. He dodged just in time, the blade slicing a deep gash across his left arm, blood pouring out and soaking his long sleeve. Ryan roared like a wounded animal and threw a hook at the man's jaw with a heavy fist. Bone crunched, and blood from his nose splattered onto the old floral wallpaper, then used the kitchen knife to slice open his throat, blood staining the carpeted floor like a red river under the pale moon. He wiped the blade on a clean napkin from the nearby dining table and checked the encrypted phone on the first body. A message from Raul Mendoza in Mexico City. "Take Whitaker alive. He knows too much about the pipeline." Ryan gasped for air, his chest heaving, a fire raging in his gut. He quickly opened the basement door with the code. Ava rushed out and hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Are you okay?" "Blood." "You're covered in it." Noah stared at the bodies strewn across the floor, his face pale with horror. "Dad, how did you do that?" Harper trembled in her mother's arms, whispering, "You're a hero." "Right. Dad? Like a superhero." Ryan herded his family into the old van in the garage and sped through the dark streets to a cheap motel on the outskirts of Chicago. Room number 7, with tattered window curtains and the musty smell of old carpet rising up to meet them. You'll be safe here for now. Lock the door. And don't open it for anyone. I'll be back when it's over. He called Logan Pierce on a secret device in the van, his voice hoarse from blood loss. They hit the house. 4 of them. From Raul in Mexico. I have to go to their safe house. Logan's voice was grim on the other end, the sound of keyboard clicks echoing in the background. You're insane. Ryan, he has an army. Wait for my support. Ryan didn't listen, slamming his foot on the gas and speeding into the night. Remembering Grayson's words from that morning, the older the ginger, the hotter the spice. Disown. Grayson had promised to come if needed, to prove the old Vietnam vet still had it. Ryan drove the pickup to the Cartel's stronghold on the west side of Chicago, a decrepit warehouse by the foul-smelling Chicago River, the air thick with the stench of toxic chemicals and old gasoline. The sound of river water lapping against the cracked concrete banks. He broke in through a hole-ridden corrugated roof, avoiding security cameras with a rope from his bag, and slit the first guard's throat with his dagger. Blood stained the mottled concrete floor as the body fell silently without a sound. Inside, the back room filled with black money. Brown leather suitcases were stacked high like mountains of dirty cash from drugs and human trafficking. The musty smell of mold and men's sweat thick under the flickering fluorescent lights. Ryan poured gasoline from a spare can hidden in his jacket, the potent fumes spreading like a curse. Then lit it with a Zippo. Lighter flames erupted violently, licking at tens of millions of dollars. Black smoke billowing up like a dragon from hell. The crackling of burning paper mingling with the deafening shriek of alarms throughout the warehouse. The remaining assassins poured out from an adjacent room. 6 men, armed with AK-47 seconds, rushing in like a pack of wolves. Guns blazing, bullets pinged off the metal walls, sparks flying and illuminating Ryan's scarred face. He ran out to the back lot, jumped into his pickup, and floored it, roaring into the dark night as the engine's growl drowned out the screams behind him. A breathtaking chase began on the midnight highway. 3 of the cartel's armored SUVs closed in, their headlights glaring like demonic eyes. Machine guns firing from the windows, the pickup's windows shattered, sending shards of glass raining down like metal. Bullets grazing the rearview mirror and leaving searing scratches. Ryan swerved sharply into a narrow alley by the river and threw a smoke grenade behind him. Thick white smoke blanketed the street like a hellish fog. One SUV slammed into a brick wall and exploded into a blazing fireball, sending shrapnel flying in all directions like deadly fireworks. The second one stayed on his tail. Shooting out his rear tire, the pickup swerved, the tire screeching on the dew-slicked pavement. Ryan pushed the accelerator to the floor and sped into a dark tunnel under the city, the echo of gunfire reverberating like maniacal laughter. He barely escaped, blood from his shoulder wound seeping out and staining the steering wheel, his vision blurring from sweat and blood loss. Returning to the abandoned warehouse, Ryan landed with the truck screeching on the gravel, transforming the place into a fortress. He planted C4 mines under the cracked concrete floor, set up shrapnel traps in broken glass bottles, and checked the barbed wire around the twisted iron gate. He called Grayson, "Dad, they're coming. You ready?" Grayson chuckled over the phone. Father and son, fighting together, just like the old days. Logan confirmed from a distance. "I've hacked in Raul's allied with the Japanese Yakuza. They're sending forces from Tokyo. Heavy weapons." Ryan tensed. Memories of an assassination mission in Osaka 2 decades ago flooding back. He had spared a young Yakuza boss in exchange for information that saved his team. Now, perhaps, the man wanted revenge. The air in the warehouse was heavy with the smell of rusted metal and old machine oil. Ryan looked out the broken window as the wind howled like a warning. Could he hold them off? Or would the dark alliance from Mexico and Japan swallow everything whole? The distant roar of an SUV engine pulled Ryan Whitaker from the throbbing pain in his shoulder. He knew Raul Mendoza wasn't done. He'd send another team from Mexico to avenge the mountain of black money burned to ashes in Chicago. I have to hit them first, before they get to the warehouse, Ryan thought, his hand tightening on the makeshift bandage around the deep cut. Warm blood still seeping through his worn leather jacket and staining the steering wheel of his pickup. Logan Pierce called on the encrypted device hidden in his pocket, his hoarse voice crackling from the tiny speaker, cutting through the sound of the Lake Michigan wind whistling past the broken glass. Raul's mobilizing an elite team from the border. They'll hit Chicago in 48 hours. What are you planning to do? You maniac? Let me hack some more intel. Ryan smirked, looking out the window of the abandoned warehouse, where dust swirled under the hole-ridden roof, moonlight stretching across the cracked concrete floor. Flying to Mexico. Hit his stronghold before he can even breathe. I can't wait. Logan let out a heavy sigh over the phone. Like the old days in Baghdad. Huh? All right. I'll track you via satellite. Be careful. My friend Raul's got guards like bloodhounds. Ryan hung up and drove the old pickup to a private airport on the outskirts of Chicago, where small planes huddled under the pale yellow lights of a runway damp with night mist. The acrid smell of jet fuel and lake salt hanging heavy in the air. He bought a ticket for a black flight, the kind that bypasses official customs, reserved for men like him to Mexico City. His travel bag concealing a Glock 19 and a carbon dagger beneath a layer of light grey clothes. The plane took off as the weak dawn broke, the drone of its engines drowning out the lapping waves of the lake. But Ryan's mind reeled with the image of his family at the motel. Ava sobbing as she held Harper by the musty motel bed. Noah glaring at him through the phone with a mix of anger and worry. You promised you'd be home soon. Dad, don't make me worry. I'm doing this for them, he told himself, looking down at the windy city shrinking beneath the plane's wing. Its grey skyscrapers shimmering in the early sun. The Mexican air greeted him with a humid heat and the thick smell of olives and exhaust fumes when he landed at fiery red Sunset. The streets crowded with the blare of car horns and roadside stalls selling char-smoked tacos under the pale yellow streetlights. Raul's stronghold was on the outskirts of Mexico City, a fortified villa hidden behind 3-meter-high stone walls and a dense web of electric fencing, where the Los Lobos cartel hid hundreds of millions in black money from drugs and human trafficking across the border. Disguised as a delivery driver, Ryan approached the back gate in an old truck under the long shadows of flickering streetlights. The scent of wildflowers mixed with gasoline hitting his nose like a warning. His agent's intuition tingled. This was the beating heart of Raul's empire, where he laundered money through shell banks and planned his expansion into Chicago. He avoided the infrared cameras by cutting the wires remotely with a pair of specialized pliers, the soft click of metal blending into the night wind and the chirping of insects. Climbing over the electric fence, Ryan rolled onto the damp, lush grass, the darkness embracing him like an old friend from his past CIA missions. The first guard was patrolling nearby, the red cherry of his cigar glowing under the waning moon. Ryan lunged from a dense bush, his dagger slicing across the man's throat, the blade gliding smoothly through flesh. Hot blood spraying out to stain the green grass. The body collapsing without a sound as the metallic scent mingled with the pungent smoke of Cuban tobacco. The second man emerged from the shadows of the backyard, a Beretta pistol held firmly in his right hand. Ryan sidestepped smoothly, hook kicking the man's leg and sending him tumbling onto the dew-soaked grass, and then drove his elbow into his temple. The crack of bone echoed softly in the quiet night, and the man fell unconscious instantly. His eyes rolled back white. He slipped into the cash house through a heavy oak side door, the air thick with the smell of old, musty banknotes and the dense sweat of men. Black leather suitcases stacked like mountains under the flickering fluorescent lights of the high ceiling. Ryan poured gasoline from a spare can hidden in his truck, the strong fumes stinging his nose like a curse from hell. Soaking his worn leather shoes, He lit it with a Zippo lighter engraved with Harper's name. The flame erupted violently from a corner of suitcases, licking at the stacks of banknotes. Black smoke billowing up like an awakening monster. The crackle of burning paper mixing with the piercing shriek of alarms blaring throughout the fortified villa. Headlight beams from the front yard swept erratically across the frosted glass windows. And shouts in Spanish echoed. Fuego! Intruso en el almacén. Fire! Intruder in the warehouse. Raúl's assassins swarmed out from the side rooms like hornets from a disturbed nest. 8 men armed with AK-47 seconds and razor-sharp Mexican machetes, charging into the backyard with bloodshot eyes under the crescent moon, their heavy boots trampling the wet grass. Ryan ran into the yard, rolling through a thick bush to dodge the first volley. The AK round slammed into the stone wall with a dry crack, shrapnel flying past his cheek like sharp knives, warm blood trickling from the new scratch. He jumped into the old truck, floored the gas, and smashed through the warped iron gate with a screech of tearing metal. The engine's roar drowning out the continuous gunfire from behind. Bullets pinging against the truck's frame like metal rain. A breathtaking chase began on the highways of Mexico City at night. 4 armored cartel SUVs tailed him like ghosts, their blinding headlights sweeping across the shattered windshield. Machine guns firing from the windows. The truck's glass exploded, showering him with shards. A bullet grazing Ryan's shoulder and tearing through his leather jacket, leaving a searing burn that spread like fire. He swerved sharply onto a winding mountain road leading to the desolate outskirts, the tires screaming on the loose, red-dusted gravel, the stench of burning rubber filling the hot cabin. An SUV caught up from behind, and an assassin leaped onto the truck bed, swinging a machete down from above, the blade flashing in the moonlight. Ryan gritted his teeth, slamming his elbow into the man's face. Blood from his nose splattered across the windshield, then shoved him off the winding road, his body tumbling under the rear wheels with a choked-off scream that vanished into the mountain wind. But bullets from another SUV slammed into the engine, thick, black smoke pouring from the hood, the acrid smell of burning oil stinging Ryan's nostrils. He pushed the accelerator to the floor and threw a smoke grenade into the back of the truck. Thick white smoke blanketed the mountain road like a hellish fog, and one SUV slammed into a granite cliff face, exploding into a blazing red fireball. Metal fragments flying everywhere, lighting up the dark night like deadly fireworks. The explosion echoing through the valley. The last SUV clung to him like a hound. Shooting out the truck's front tire, the vehicle lost control and veered towards a steep cliff covered in thorny cacti. Ryan leaped from the cabin in midair, rolling down the damp, reddish-brown dirt slope. A sharp pain from an old wound twisting in his bones like a knife. His face covered in red dust. The assassins pursued from above, their heavy steps crunching on dry leaves and loose, jagged rocks. Ryan took cover behind a spiny cactus, waiting for his moment in the dark. The first one rushed forward, pistol raised, and Ryan plunged his dagger straight into the man's chest, the blade piercing his thick leather vest, blood gushing out like a warm spring under the crescent moon. The second man fired his pistol from a distance, the bullet whizzing past Ryan's ear with a deafening ring. He lunged out like a shadow, kicking low into the man's knee. The crack of breaking bone echoed across the hills, then followed with a flurry of punches to the face, blood staining the dry desert, earth red. The last man, tall and broad, with a grey wolf tattoo on his neck, the mark of loyalty to Los Lobos, slashed a knife across Ryan's stomach under the silver moonlight. He dodged just in time, twisting the man's arm with a joint lock technique learned from his brutal CIA training, then drove his knife into his throat. Blood soaked his black shirt, and the man's body collapsed with a final, choked-off groan. Ryan gasped for breath, his chest heaving in the dry desert air, and checked the bodies. Their encrypted phone had a message from Raúl "Kill" Whitaker. "He burned all my money. Sending more from Japan. He dragged himself to the main road, covered in red dust, and caught another truck back to the underground airfield, flying back to Chicago with a critical wound bleeding steadily, his vision blurring from blood loss and salty sweat. In his Mexican villa, Raul Mendoza slammed his scarred fist on the walnut table, shattering it, his face purple with rage under the glittering crystal chandelier. "Goddamn Whitaker! I'm bringing the whole team from Japan to Chicago. I want him in pieces before dawn," he barked orders at his trembling assistant, his voice a feral growl. "Call the Yakuza Alliance. We need katanas and submachine guns, heavy weapons to crush him." Ryan landed at dawn in Chicago, the cool morning air carrying the scent of coffee from a roadside diner and drifting over a Lake Michigan that glittered in the weak sun. He drove to an abandoned warehouse, where rusted machines stood silent like decaying sentinels under a leaky tin roof. He called Grayson Whitaker. "Dad, they're coming. Are you ready?" Grayson chuckled over the phone, the old man's voice firm from the nursing home. "This old dog's still got plenty of bite." "Zoe, I'll bring my old hunting rifle to the warehouse." Logan confirmed from a distance. "I'm setting up the M24 sniper rifle. This warehouse is going to be their tomb. I've hacked the location of the team from Japan." Ryan turned the place into a death trap, planting more C4 mines under the stained concrete floor, setting caltrop traps in shattered glass bottles, and checking the barbed wire around the pitch-black entrance. Memories of the CIA flooded back, nights of assassinations in the Syrian desert, blood on the yellow sand under a scorching sun, and the decision to retire for Ava and the kids. "I won't let them touch my family," he thought, a leaden weight pressing on his chest, his hand trembling slightly as he checked the Glock's trigger. Ava called from the motel, her voice trembling over the phone. "Where are you? Noah keeps asking what you're doing. And Harper was drawing pictures of you as a hero all night," Ryan reassured her, his voice gentle despite the pain. "You're safe for now. I'll be home soon. My love." But he knew Raul would bring a stronger team, with an alliance from Japan, razor-sharp katanas, and sophisticated automatic weapons. Not just crude machine guns. That night, the warehouse was plunged into a heavy darkness, with only the sound of the wind whistling through broken windows and the thick, musty smell of old machine oil. Ryan hid behind a giant, rusty press, listening to the sound of an SUV with a growling engine stop outside the twisted iron gate. Could he hold out until Grayson and Logan arrived? Or would the fire he started in Mexico burn everything down, taking with it the last peaceful moments of his family? The darkness closed in, and the real battle was about to begin. Darkness enveloped the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago, and the real battle began. The sound of an SUV stopping outside the twisted iron gate echoed like a declaration of war from hell, pulling Ryan Whitaker from his thoughts of his family hiding in a cheap motel. He hid behind a giant, rusted press, his heart beating with the steady rhythm of a time bomb, his hand tightly gripping the Glock 19, its barrel still warm from the last test shot. His cold grey eyes scanned the dusty darkness, the thick smell of old machine oil rising from the stained concrete floor. Ryan knew Raul Mendoza had sent his first team from Mexico, 12 men, their body armor glinting under the headlights of the sleek black SUVs. AK-47 seconds held ready, like the Grim Reaper's scythe, storming through the main entrance with the professional stride of cartel mercenaries. "Where are Grayson and Logan?" Ryan thought to himself, a cold sweat rolling down his forehead despite the biting winter air that seeped through the cracked walls like a deathly whisper. The first trap triggered instantly. Glass bottles packed with sharp nails exploded as the lead assassin tripped a wire, sending a deadly rain of sharp glass and metal flying. 3 men collapsed on the spot, their groans mingling with the clanging echo of metal ricocheting through the vast, silent space filled with dormant machinery. Ryan burst from the shadows like an old ghost, his carbon dagger flashing under the SUV's headlights as he slit the fourth man's throat. The blade slid through flesh with a sickening wet sound. Hot blood spraying onto the rusted wall, staining the peeling paint. The man's body crashed to the concrete floor with a heavy thud. The fifth man spun around, firing a silenced pistol with a series of muffled thumps. A bullet grazed Ryan's shoulder, tearing through his worn leather jacket and leaving a searing pain that spread like fire as warm blood immediately soaked the fabric. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he rolled across the dusty floor, grabbing a rusty iron bar from a scrap heap and slamming it into the man's head. The skull fractured with a sharp crack that echoed like a small thunderclap, splattering blood and grime across Ryan's face. Suddenly, the sharp report of a sniper rifle echoed from the warehouse's upper level. Logan Pierce had arrived, hidden behind a rotting iron railing with his specialized M24, taking down two men near the main entrance with precise shots. Their heads exploded like ripe watermelons in the desert sun, brains and blood splattering across old, dented oil drums, just like the old days in Kabul. "Ryan, they're numerous." "But they're stupid," Logan yelled from above, his hoarse voice cutting through the ringing gunfire that echoed through the vast, metallic space. Grayson Whitaker charged in from a side door, his silver hair whipping in the wind blowing through a broken entrance. His old Colt pistol, a relic from his Vietnam days, flashed as he dropped another man with a shot between the eyes. The bullet tore through a leather helmet, blood spraying backward like a red fountain in the headlights. The older the wolf, the sharper the tooth. "Son, don't you let them lay a hand on you," Grayson roared, his solid 70-year-old frame still moving with the agility of his old Special Forces days. His calloused, battle-scarred hand gripping the pistol tightly. But Raoul's assassins mounted a fierce counterattack. One of them threw a fragmentation grenade toward the group with a sharp whistle. Ryan screamed, "Get down! Next trap!" He rolled behind a large, dusty wooden crate as the explosion rocked the warehouse like a small earthquake. Metal shards flew like sharp knives, one slicing across his cheek, leaving a cut that welled with warm blood. A deafening ringing filled his ears. Mixed with the acrid smell of gunpowder, he immediately activated the second trap. A homemade mine under the concrete floor detonated with a deafening roar, tearing apart four men who were rushing in from a secondary entrance. Blood and flesh rained down everywhere in a sickening, metallic shower, the smell of burnt meat spreading with the billowing black smoke. From the upper level, Logan continued his sniping with CIA-trained, machine-like precision. One shot, one kill. 3 more heads exploded with wet thuds, blood spattering the rusted ceiling and dripping to the floor like a crimson rain. Grayson, drawing on his experience from the mud and bombs of the Vietnam battlefield, engaged the nearest assassin in close combat. He used the butt of his Colt to shatter the man's nose with a dry waste, sickening crack of bone, then kicked low into his knee. As the man crumpled with a groan of pain, Grayson plunged a dagger into his throat, blood pooling on the mottled concrete like a river in hell. Taking advantage of the smoke and dust from the explosion, Ryan charged into the remaining group like a whirlwind. He landed a series of heavy-fisted blows to one man's face, the crack of a splintering jawbone audible as blood from his nose sprayed onto the rusted wall. He sweep-kicked a second man, sending him crashing to the dusty floor, then drove his dagger into the man's chest. The blade punched through his flimsy body armor, and hot blood gushed out, soaking Ryan's hand. Logan's voice cut through the whistling wind from above. 7 more. "They're more than we expected. They've got remote support." Ryan gave a quick nod, pulling Grayson behind a giant industrial press to avoid a sweeping burst of AK-47 fire. Bullets pinged off the metal, sparks flying and illuminating his battle-scarred face in the dim headlights. "You okay?" Dad, don't let that old wound act up, Ryan asked, wiping blood from his face with the back of a grimy hand. Grayson smirked, his grey-blue eyes glinting in the flickering light. I took on a whole battalion at Kaisan. ID. Son, let's split up, I'll cover the right. They gave each other a quick hand signal. A relic from their CIA training days. Ryan triggered a smoke grenade from a pouch on his hip. Thick. White smoke billowed out, blanketing the warehouse in a hellish fog, filled with the sounds of panicked footsteps and choking coughs. He moved like a phantom through the smoke and slit an assassin's throat from behind. The dagger slid through flesh smoothly. Hot blood spraying onto his face, mingling with the acrid smoke. A second man lunged at him with a Mexican machete, swinging it at Ryan's stomach with a sharp whistle. Ryan dodged just in time, then broke the man's wrist with a brutal joint lock he'd learned in harsh training. The machete clattered to the floor. Ryan drove his own blade into the man's thigh. Blood soaked the concrete as the man screamed in agony before collapsing. Logan sniped from the railing above, taking down two more men who were climbing the rickety iron staircase. Their heads exploded with wet thuds, blood splattering the railing and dripping below like a foul-smelling rain. But a stray bullet from an assassin caught Logan in the calf. Damn it, that hurts, he groaned, stumbling back behind an old oil drum. Blood soaking through his torn jeans. Grayson provided immediate cover, charging down from the upper level with a rusty iron bar as a makeshift weapon. He shattered the nose of a man aiming at Logan, blood splashing across the old man's face. Then threw a smoke grenade. The explosion tore apart the remaining three men who were surrounding the entrance, sending body parts flying amidst the thick black smoke. The stench of burnt flesh, like a curse, filled the warehouse. Ryan, panting, his shoulder wound bleeding steadily and staining his shirt, checked his Glock. Only 3 rounds left. Grayson and Logan regrouped with him behind the press. All 3 were badly wounded, their torn shirts and dusty jeans soaked with blood. First wave's done, but they'll send more, Ryan said, his voice raspy as he wiped blood from his face with a trembling hand. Logan checked an encrypted phone he'd taken from a dead assassin, his face pale in the light of the still-on SUV headlights. Raoul's allied with the Japanese Yakuza. They're sending more forces from Tokyo, not just crude AKs, but antique katanas and modern directional bombs. Ryan froze. A memory from his CIA days 2 decades ago hitting him like a sharp blade, an assassination mission in a rain-drenched Osaka, where he had spared a young Yakuza boss named Hiroshi Kato in exchange for information that saved his CIA teammates. That decision had led to his hasty retirement to escape the endless cycle of revenge. Now, Kato had likely risen to power, and allied with Raoul to expand his drug empire into Asia through the port of Chicago. So the past is coming back to haunt me, Ryan whispered, a leaden weight pressing on his chest as his hand unconsciously touched a faint scar on his arm from that long-ago mission. Grayson clapped a hand on his son's shoulder, his calloused, battle-scarred fingers squeezing tight. Son, we'll beat them, but we need a bigger trap, and we need to rest to hold out. Logan nodded, limping on his wounded leg. I'll hack their system for more intel. The Yakuza bring sophisticated weapons, pneumatic guns, and vibro knives. The warehouse air was thick with the metallic stench of blood and the acrid smoke of gunpowder. Ryan looked out a shattered window, where the Chicago moonlight illuminated the piles of bodies like a scene from a modern-day hell, with Lake Michigan glittering in the distance. He remembered Ava calling him from the motel that afternoon, her voice trembling. Noah's mad at you because of the secrets. But Harper drew a picture of her hero, Dadu, holding a gun and fighting monsters. I won't let them touch them, Ryan thought, resetting a directional mine hidden behind the giant press, his hands trembling slightly from blood loss and the weight of his memories. But an alliance with the Japanese Yakuza meant the enemy wasn't just more numerous, but also smarter and more ruthless assassins who combined ancient samurai martial arts with modern technology from Tokyo. Could the three of them hold out against the next wave from the darkness of Mexico and Japan? Or would the past he had spared become the blade that finally ended him? Devouring everything he fought to protect, the night wind whistled through the warehouse like the whisper of death itself. And Ryan knew that dawn would bring a deadlier assault. With katanas gleaming in the early morning sun, the night wind howled through the broken window like a death omen. And Ryan Whitaker knew the next attack was coming. The distant roar of SUV engines echoed, pulling him from the exhaustion of the first battle. His shoulder wound still weeping, blood through the makeshift bandage wrapped around his muscular arm, dust and the thick, metallic smell of blood filled the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago. Ryan leaned against a bullet-riddled concrete wall, blood dripping from his back and arm. His carbon dagger still clutched in a hand that trembled with exhaustion and blood loss. Grayson Whitaker and Logan Pierce were more severely injured, taking cover behind the giant. Rusted press, their breathing ragged, their torn shirts soaked red, but headlights from the gate sliced through the darkness like the Grim Reaper's scythe. And the sound of heavy footsteps echoed 15 assassins in the second wave. It was a mix of the Mexican Cartel and the first of the Japanese Yakuza, their black vests revealing arms sleeved in shimmering dragon tattoos. They stormed in with MP5 submachine guns and katanas at the ready, moving with the deadly coordination of a wolf pack fused with dragons. Ryan activated the next trap with a hidden button on the rusted wall. The industrial press roared to life with a deafening shriek of grinding metal, crushing 2 Yakuza members who had charged through the main entrance. The sound of shattering bone mingled with the scream of steel grinding flesh into pulp, blood spreading across the concrete floor like a red river under the flickering fluorescent lights. 2 down, there are more of them, Ryan yelled, lunging from the shadows, his dagger slitting the throat of a third cartel member. The blade slid through flesh with a wet whisper, hot blood mixing with cold sweat on his face as the man's body collapsed with a heavy thud. A fourth man fired a silenced MP5, a bullet slamming into Ryan's arm with a muffled thump, a sharp pain, like a knife slicing through muscle, shot from his bicep to his shoulder as warm blood soaked his torn sleeve, gritting his teeth. He vaulted over a dusty, rusted crate and delivered a brutal uppercut to the man's jaw. Bone cracked audibly as blood from the man's nose sprayed onto the mottled metal wall. Grayson laid down cover fire from the upper floor with his old Colt, taking down a Yakuza with the last shot from his spare magazine. Just like the old days at Keisan. Son, don't let him get close. The bullet tore through the man's shoulder, blood spraying backward like a red fountain in the SUV's headlights. Logan, despite his leg bleeding profusely, sniped from the corner of a rusted iron staircase with an M24. A cartel member's head exploded like a watermelon cracking in the desert sun, brain matter splattering the railing and dripping onto the floor below. But the assassins fought back fiercely. A Yakuza threw a smoke grenade with a sharp whistle. Thick white smoke blanketed the warehouse like a hellish fog, the sound of chaotic footsteps echoing amidst choked, stinging coughs. Ryan coughed hard, rolling into a pitch-black corner, and grabbed a rusty iron bar from a scrap heap. Slamming it hard into the nearest assassin's head, blood sprayed onto the rusty wall as the man's body collapsed with a choked-off groan. The second man lunged forward, his katana blade flashing in the headlights. Slashing horizontally at Ryan's chest with a deadly whistle, he dodged smoothly to the side and kicked low at the man's knee. The bone snapped like a dry twig. He then plunged his combat knife into the man's chest, the blade piercing the thick leather vest. Blood pooling on the stained concrete floor, the last man in the initial group. Tall, with a grey wolf tattoo on his neck, a sign of loyalty to Los Lobos, drew an MP5 submachine gun and opened fire, spraying a wide arc of bullets. Ryan rolled across the dusty floor, snatched a grenade from a dead enemy's belt, and threw it back. The explosion rocked the warehouse with a deafening ringing sound, tearing the man into chunks of flying flesh as the acrid smell of burnt explosives mingled with billowing black smoke. Ryan gasped for breath and checked his Glock, completely empty. The barrel searing hot in his hand. The wound on his arm bled steadily, his vision blurring from blood loss and the stinging smoke. His chest heaving like a blacksmith's bellows. 10 more! We're surrounded! Logan yelled from the iron staircase, his voice weak from the bleeding leg wound that was staining the steps red. Grayson and Logan regrouped with Ryan behind a large wooden crate, all three heavily wounded, their blood soaking through torn shirts and dust-caked jeans. Lead them into the final trap. Son. Grayson said, gripping an old Vietnam-era combat knife, his grey-blue eyes glinting in the flickering light. Ryan nodded, his gut churning like lava. We split up, Dad. You take the left? Logan. Cover from above. I'll take the center. They gave quick hand signals like in their CIA training days. Ryan triggered a second smoke grenade. The white mist, once again shrouding the warehouse in a hellish fog as chaotic footsteps echoed. He charged into close combat through the smoke and dust. An assassin jumped out and punched Ryan hard in the face. The heavy fist sent blood streaming from his nose. His vision flashing black, Ryan roared, wrapping a preset steel wire from an old trap around the man's legs and yanking him to the floor, then drove his knife into his neck. A warm fountain of blood soaking his face. Logan sniped from the railing above, taking down 2 men, climbing the stairs with precise shots. Their heads exploded, blood splattering the rusty ceiling and dripping down like a foul rain. But a bullet from an assassin slammed into Logan's shoulder. Ah! They've got suppressed weapons, he groaned, nearly falling from the rusted iron railing. His hand on the M24, slick with blood. Grayson charged in from a side entrance to help, using a rusty iron bar to shatter a Yakuza's nose, blood spraying across the old man's silver hair, then hooking his leg to trip him. Father and son, fighting together. Just like the old days, Grayson bellowed, his hoarse voice cutting through the gunfire. Ryan, blood pouring from his back, where shrapnel had torn it open, triggered the final trap. A directional mine hidden behind a pressing machine detonated with a deafening roar, tearing apart the 3 men surrounding the entrance. Body parts flew amidst black smoke, and the sickeningly sweet smell of burnt flesh filled the air. He leaped up from the wreckage, throwing a flurry of exhausted punches into the last man's face, feeling the jawbone crack, and then smashed his head into the concrete floor. The skull split open with a wet thud, blood spreading out like a small crimson lake. It's over. They're pulling back for now, Ryan yelled, staggering against the stained concrete wall, his vision blurring from exhaustion and blood loss, his chest heaving like a bellows. Logan checked the hidden cameras on the warehouse ceiling through his encrypted phone, his face pale in the light of the still-running SUV. Raul isn't in Chicago. He survived the fire in Mexico. He's at his main stronghold calling in more forces from the Yakuza in Japan, heavy weapons, electric katanas, and MP-5K submachine guns. Ryan froze, the memory hitting him like a sharp blade. The mission in Osaka years ago, where he'd spared Hiroshi Kato's life, which led to this unholy alliance with Raul to take over the global drug trade. He's preparing the final blow, not a hunt. A slaughter, Ryan whispered, hastily bandaging his wound with a strip of cloth from his torn shirt. Grayson clapped his son on the shoulder, his hand trembling slightly with age, but still firm. Son, we can turn this around, but we need rest and a new set of traps. I'll call an old friend from the army. Logan nodded, dragging his wounded leg. I'll do more digging. The ones from Japan will bring secrets with them, a betrayal inside the cartel. One of Raul's lieutenants is selling info to Kato to hijack the entire operation. They dragged the bodies into a large, dusty wooden crate and poured gasoline over them from a spare can. The strong fumes stung their nostrils like a curse. Ryan lit it with a Zippo lighter engraved with the name Ava. The fire erupted violently, consuming the evidence. Black smoke billowing like a waking monster as the sizzle of burning flesh mixed with the creak of warping metal. The thick, coppery smell spread through the warehouse as flames licked the rusty ceiling, illuminating Ryan's scarred face. While clearing up, Logan hacked a dead Yakuza's phone. There was an internal betrayal. Raul's lieutenant in Mexico City sold intel to Kato. They want to take over the whole drug route. No sharing. Ryan stiffened, rage boiling inside him. So the conspiracy is bigger. The Yakuza from Japan are coming to finish the job. Not just me, but the whole network. Grayson nodded. We have to prepare. But you need a doctor, don't die of blood loss. They drove away from the warehouse, the raging fire lighting up the dark night behind them. The Chicago moon shining on Ryan's blood and sweat-streaked face. He called Ava from the highway. I'm safe. For now, I'll be back at the motel soon. Ava was crying on the other end, her voice trembling. Don't you die. Ryan. Noah and Harper are so worried they need their father. Ryan managed a weak smile, but his heart ached as if cut by a knife. The throbbing pain from his wounds spread through him, and memories of the CIA flooded back rainy nights of assassinations in Osaka. Blood on the cobblestone streets. The promise to retire for his family. An internal cartel betrayal meant the enemies weren't gone, and the Yakuza would bring sophisticated weapons from Tokyo. Could he win this final battle, or would his past devour his loved ones, turning Chicago into their grave? Dawn broke through the cracked windshield, carrying with it the breath of death from Japan, and Ryan knew the final blow was coming, as swift and sharp as a katana blade. Dawn broke through the shattered windshield, carrying with it the breath of death from Japan. The weak sunlight illuminated the scarred and blood-caked face of Ryan Whitaker as he drove the old pickup truck away from the smoldering warehouse. Black smoke still billowing behind him like a curse from hell. The I-94 highway on the outskirts of Chicago was deserted in the early morning. There was only the hoarse roar of the engine mixed with the whistle of the Lake Michigan wind through the broken glass, carrying the lingering smell of gunpowder and burnt flesh on his clothes. The wounds on his shoulder and arm bled continuously, soaking the makeshift bandage wrapped around his solid bicep. Ryan's vision blurred from blood loss and exhaustion, but he gritted his teeth and pressed the accelerator. Knowing the FBI would get to the warehouse faster than expected, the distant wail of police sirens already echoed like a warning. Can't let any trail lead back to the family, he whispered, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. His mind reeling with images of Ava and the kids at the motel, Harper drawing pictures of heroes, Noah glaring at him with a mix of anger and worry. Grayson and Logan had already split off his father, heading back to the nursing home with a limping gait. Logan dragging himself to his safe house to hack for more data. Meet at the rendezvous point, Logan had said over the phone before hanging up, his voice raspy. Get some rest, my friend. The Yakuza are coming. But rest was a luxury. Ryan pulled over on the shoulder of the lake road, under the bare winter branches of an oak tree. He wiped the blood from his face with a clean cloth from his old CIA medkit, the coppery smell mixing with the salty air from the lake. The sirens grew closer, red and blue lights flashing in the distance against the grey sky. He knew his CIA file would provide cover. He was a classified asset. Not a common criminal, but an interrogation was still a problem. A patrol car pulled up beside him. 2 local cops got out, handguns drawn, their voices hard. Get out of the car. There's a fire at the warehouse. You match the description. Ryan raised his hand slowly, his voice as calm as if he were negotiating with a target. I'm just a witness. Take me to the station. They cuffed him, the metal clicking as they shoved him into the back of the patrol car. The smell of old leather and burnt coffee hit his nose. On the way to the central Chicago precinct, Ryan stared out the smudged window. Lake Michigan glittered under the early sun like a silver blade, and his heart felt heavy. Ava, you have to keep the kids safe. The downtown Chicago FBI building was a grim, gray concrete structure with cold, one-way glass. The smell of burnt coffee and old paperwork permeated the long, dim hallways. Ryan was led into a small, cramped interrogation room. The metal table was covered in scratches. The iron chair creaked under his weight. And the cold, white fluorescent light shone down on his scarred and blood-dried face. The lead agent, a middle-aged man in a wrinkled grey suit with dead fish eyes, slammed a thick file on the table. Ryan Whitaker. Or should I say, the CIA's grey ghost. That warehouse is full of bodies, 15 of them, burned to a crisp. You really think I'm going to believe you're a maintenance man? The man spat out each word, flipping through the file with a rustle of paper. The smell of fresh ink rising. Ryan sat still, his cuffed hands cold behind his back, looking the agent straight in the eye without blinking. I was defending myself. They attacked my home first. The agent scoffed, revealing a set of yellowed teeth. Self-defense with C4 mines and combat knives? Your file is heavily redacted. But I know Los Lobos, the Mexican cartel. And now we've got signs of the Japanese Yakuza at the scene. Are you involved in a global network? Ryan was silent, staring at his own tired face in the one-way mirror. Knowing someone from the CIA was watching through a hidden camera, probably his old superior, the one who sent him to Osaka 2 decades ago. The agent slammed the table again, the sound echoing in the small room. Talk! You spared Hiroshi Kato's life all those years ago. And now he's allied with Raul Mendoza, smuggling drugs into Chicago. This is on you! Ryan stiffened, the memory rushing back like the sharp edge of a katana, a rainy Tokyo night, sparing Kato for intel that saved his team, leading to his hasty retirement. That was the past. Ryan said slowly, his voice as low as the lake wind. I retired for my family. Now they're hunting me over a petty robbery for my daughter's bracelet. The agent scoffed. Family? Your wife, Ava? Your kids, Noah and Harper. We can protect them. If you cooperate. Ryan clenched his cuffed hands, rage boiling up. Don't you touch them. The agent's phone buzzed violently on the table, the screen flashing with a call from the Pentagon. He answered, his face draining of color. Yes. There. A classified CIA file? Whitaker is an asset? He hung up, uncuffing Ryan with a trembling hand. You're lucky. The CIA is protecting you, but take my advice. Disappear. Before the Yakuza get here. Ryan stood up, rubbing his raw wrists, his voice cold. They won't stop. The agent stepped back, avoiding his eyes. Kato knows you spared his life. He wants revenge and to take over Raul's drug route. Ryan nodded, walking out of the station into the Chicago sun. Logan was waiting outside in a new pickup. The CIA got you out, but the Yakuza no Kato is connected to the Osaka mission. They want to erase you to cover up the alliance. Ryan got in, stomped on the gas, and sped into the crowded street. I have to fly to Japan. I'll end it there. Before they get to the motel. Logan shook his head, clutching a wound on his leg. You're insane. They've got katanas and submachine guns. A network all over Tokyo. Wait for Grayson, he promised remote support. Ryan nodded, but his mind was made up. I can't let them get to Chicago. My family is there. He drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts, where tattered window curtains fluttered in the lake wind, and the smell of dampness and coffee drifted from room number 7. Ava rushed out and threw her arms around him at the door, tears streaming down her plump cheeks, her brown hair a mess. You're back. The blood. Your wounds are so bad. Why didn't you let me bandage them? Ryan held his wife tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of soap on her neck, his voice a low rumble. I'm fine. The FBI let me go because of an old file. Noah stood in the corner of the room, his eyes wide with awe as he looked at his father's new scars. Dad, did you fight the FBI? I saw it on TV, the warehouse fire. Harper chirped happily from her small bed, waving a hand-drawn picture. Daddy, I drew you fighting the Mexican monster. Look. You have a big gun. Ryan knelt, pulling his daughter into his arms, looking at the scribbled drawing of a hero holding a Glock and shooting a venomous snake. Thanks. Sweetie, I'm a hero because of you. Ava pulled him into the cramped bathroom, dabbing at his wounds with a clean cloth from a first aid kit, her tears mixing with the blood. Tell me the truth. Ryan, who are you? Really? A CIA agent? Who spared a Yakuza boss in Japan? I'm scared. For Noah and Harper. Ryan took his wife's hand, his grey eyes looking deep into her brown ones. I used to be an assassin. Ava, 20 years ago, in Osaka. I spared Hiroshi Kato for intel that saved my team. Now he's allied with Raoul to smuggle drugs and he's hunting me for what I did. I hid it to protect you. Ava sobbed, squeezing his hand. I know you're strong, but please, stop. For the kids, they need a normal father. Noah stepped in, his voice trembling. Dad, I'm mad that you hid this, but I'm also proud. Teach me how to fight, so I can protect Mum and Harper. Ryan hugged his son, his heart aching. You're not ready. But one day, Harper climbed onto her father's lap, nuzzling her head against him. Promise you won't go again. Daddy? I'm scared of the monsters from Japan. Those human moments, Harper's laughter echoing in the musty motel room. Noah practicing with a toy dagger. Ava making him hot coffee were a temporary balm for Ryan's fractured soul. He briefly told them about his past, the assassinations in Baghdad, the blood on the desert sand, the promise to retire after meeting Ava in a lakeside bar. I chose you and the kids over the darkness, he said, kissing his wife's forehead. But then his phone buzzed. A text from Logan Kato is on the move. Hide out in the Tokyo suburbs. Fly now. I hacked you a black market ticket. Grayson called next. Son, I'll go with you if you need me. This old dog still has some bite, but don't you die. For Ava's sake. Ryan nodded into the phone. You stay and protect them. Logan will provide remote support. Ava pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Stop. Ryan. For Noah and Harper, they need their father alive. Ryan held her tight, his voice firm. I have to finish this. If I don't, the darkness will follow us home. He prepared, bought a black market ticket to Tokyo out of O'Hare, hid a dagger and a Glock in his suitcase under a layer of clothes, and checked the small C4 charge from Grayson's stash. The next day, sunlight streamed through the torn curtains of the motel room, and the damp air was filled with the smell of toast and coffee. Ava made herbal tea, forcing a smile. You're staying home today, right? Go play with the kids. Noah, less angry now, tossed him an old basketball. Come play with me. Dad, teach me how to shoot like an agent. Harper was drawing a new picture, the replacement silver bracelet sparkling on her wrist. Daddy bought it for me. Now I have 2 stars. Ryan hugged them. Playing basketball with Noah, in the weak sun outside the motel, their laughter echoing over the lake wind. But the secret phone vibrated in his pocket. Yakuza moving. Tokyo. Final mission. Ready? Ryan looked at his family and tossed the phone into a roadside trash can. But deep down, he knew he couldn't escape. He remembered the petty robbery that started this spiral, the blood on the subway, the fire in Mexico. His family was mending him. But his past was a ghost that wouldn't let go. He prepared to leave at dusk. His heavy suitcase at his feet by the motel door. Ava hugged him one last time. Come back alive. Ryan, I love you. Noah nodded. You better win. Harper cried. Daddy is strong. Ryan drove to the airport, his gut twisting as if cut by a knife. Would this trip to Japan finally end it all? Or would he forever be the grey ghost, wandering through a world of clandestine justice, sacrificing his peace for some distant darkness? The Chicago sunset glinted off the shattered windshield of his pickup truck, carrying a warning on the east wind from Lake Michigan. And Ryan knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had to fly to Japan and end this ghost from his past before it reached the motel where Ava and the kids were hiding. Kato's katana was waiting in Tokyo. The plane landed at Tokyo's Narita airport late at night in a light drizzle. The humid air carried the scent of cherry blossoms mixed with the thick exhaust from the glittering neon streets, while the distant whistle of a subway train echoed like a whisper from the city that never sleeps. Ryan, disguised as an ordinary American tourist, slipped through the crowd of tired passengers under the cold, white fluorescent lights, his travel suitcase concealing a Glock 19 and a carbon fiber dagger beneath a layer of plain grey clothes. Hiroshi Kato's stronghold was in the Tokyo suburbs, an ancient Edo-style building hidden behind a dense bamboo garden and high stone walls, a place where the Yakuza smuggled heavy weapons, MP5K submachine guns, and modern katanas to seize the drug routes from Raul Mendoza's Los Lobos cartel. This is the end, Ryan thought, his operative's intuition tingling under his skin like a high-voltage current. Death was waiting with a razor-sharp blade. He hailed a worn-out taxi from the airport, sinking into the back seat with a baseball cap pulled low, watching the dark suburban streets slick with rain through the fogged-up window. Red paper lanterns dangling in front of traditional wooden houses. Logan called from Chicago on an encrypted device. Kato's compound is in the Setagaya district electric fence. Infrared cameras. 10 guards. I've hacked a map of the underground armory. Be careful. Man Kato knows you're coming. Ryan nodded into the humid air. Just like the Osaka mission. I'll finish it. Logan hid. You spared his life for the intel that saved mine. Now he's out for blood, don't hesitate. Ryan ended the call, a heavy weight in his chest. The memory of that rainy Tokyo night 2 decades ago flooded back, when he spared Kato for data that saved his team, leading to a hasty retirement and his life with Ava. Now Kato, the Yakuza boss with a dragon tattoo covering his back, was allied with Raul to expand his empire. And Ryan was the last thing standing in his way. The taxi dropped him in a dark alley half a kilometer from the compound. Ryan paid in Japanese yen from his old leather wallet and stepped out into the cold drizzle that whipped his face like needles. He moved silently through the dense bamboo garden, leaves rustling under his worn leather boots, the smell of damp earth and incense from a nearby shrine filling his nostrils. Evading the infrared cameras by wrapping black cloth around his body, an old CIA trick, Ryan cut the electric fence wire with a pair of specialized pliers. The soft snip of metal lost in the patter of the rain. He scaled the high stone wall and rolled onto the slick green lawn, the darkness embracing him like an old friend from his missions in the Syrian desert. The first guard was patrolling under the wooden eaves, the cherry of his cigarette glowing in the sliver of moonlight. Ryan burst from the bamboo, his dagger slicing cleanly across the man's throat. The blade glided through flesh, and hot blood sprayed out, staining the wet grass red. The body fell without a sound, the metallic scent of blood mingling with the salty drizzle. A second guard emerged from the shadows of the backyard, his katana half drawn, its blade flashing in the moonlight. Ryan dodged smoothly to the side, hooked the man's leg to send him sprawling on the damp ground, then brought his elbow down on his temple. The crack of bone echoed softly in the quiet night as the guard went limp. His eyes rolled back in his head under the falling rain. A piercing alarm shrieked from the main building. Searchlights swept wildly across the bamboo garden as shouts in Japanese erupted. "Intruder! Protect the Oyabun!" Yakuza assassins poured out of the side doors like hornets from a disturbed nest. 6 of them armed with Walther PPK pistols and short tanto knives. Storming the yard with the professional footing of a sumo samurai hybrid, Ryan rolled behind a thick bush, dodging the first volley of shots. A Walther round slammed into a bamboo stalk with a dry crack, splinters flying past his cheek, drawing a warm trickle of blood from a fresh scratch. He scooped up the katana from the second guard's body. The blade felt heavy, and right in his hands as he cut one down with a diagonal slash, the katana tore through a black suit vest, blood soaking the garden soil in the drizzle, followed by the sharp clang of steel on steel. Hiroshi Kato emerged from the main entrance of the ancient, towering building, his silvery white hair tied in a samurai topknot. His black eyes were as sharp as blades under the crescent moon, and his black kimono shimmered with the tattoo of a coiled dragon. "Whitaker, you spared my life in Osaka 2 decades ago, and now I'll take yours to repay the debt," he roared in Japanese-accented English, pulling an MP5K submachine gun from his belt and firing wildly across the garden. Ryan used his katana as a makeshift shield. Bullets pinged off the blade, sending sparks flying into the rain as he lunged forward like a ghost. He slashed at Kato's shoulder, the katana slicing deep through the kimono's fabric, staining the shimmering black cloth with blood. Kato dodged smoothly with an aikido technique, then drove a powerful hook into Ryan's stomach, making him gasp for air as a sharp pain, like a broken rib, spread through him. Gritting his teeth, Ryan spun and slashed his katana across Kato's thigh. The blade cut deep, and Kato dropped to one knee on the wet ground, blood pouring out and mixing with the crimson-tinted drizzle. But his bodyguards rushed in to help. One of them threw a high karate kick at Ryan's face. He dodged just in time, snapping the man's leg with a CIA joint lock. The sound of bone cracking echoed in the rain before he plunged his katana into the man's chest. A warm fountain of blood sprayed out, soaking his leather jacket. A brutal melee erupted in the late-blooming cherry blossom garden. Ryan fought 3 men at once in the freezing drizzle, dodging punches and kicks that whistled past him. He swept one man's legs, sending him tumbling into a bamboo thicket, and then used his elbow to shatter the second man's jaw. Blood splattered, mixing with the falling cherry blossoms. The third man pulled a Walther and fired at point-blank range. The bullet slammed into Ryan's shoulder with a sickening thud, a searing pain spreading as warm blood seeped out into the rain. He roared, lunging forward to twist the man's arm backward before plunging a dagger into his throat. Blood stained the garden soil as the body collapsed with a choked-off groan. Kato, despite the gushing wound in his thigh, grabbed his MP5K and kept firing from the ground. A bullet grazed Ryan's thigh, and he rolled across the damp earth, snatching a grenade from a dead bodyguard and tossing it through a side door into the hidden armory. The explosion shook the ancient building with a deafening roar. Flames erupted, consuming cases of firearms and spare katanas. Black smoke billowed up like a dragon from hell as metal shrapnel rained down under the crescent moon. Kato charged with the last katana drawn from his belt. Slashing down with a deadly whistle, Ryan blocked it with his dagger. The sharp clang of metal on metal echoed, sparks flying in the drizzle. They clashed in a fierce one-on-one duel amidst the smoldering cherry blossom garden. Kato slashed at Ryan's shoulder, the katana blade tearing through his jacket and skin, drawing warm blood. Ryan dodged, then kicked him in the stomach, forcing a pained grunt. Kato landed a hook to Ryan's jaw, a crack of bone, and blood flew from Ryan's nose. Ryan ducked, then smashed his elbow into Kato's nose. Blood splattered across the black kimono. Kato choked Ryan with his calloused left hand, his fingernails tearing at the skin on his neck. Ryan struggled, stabbing his dagger into Kato's wounded thigh. Blood poured out, mixing with the rain to stain the garden. Soiled crimson, Kato fell to his knees but still swung his katana one last time across Ryan's chest. The blade sliced deep into his flesh, and hot blood sprayed out under the moon, roaring like a savage beast. Ryan spun and plunged his dagger straight into Kato's chest. The blade pierced his heart through the kimono fabric. His eyes widened in horror. Blood gurgled from his mouth, and he collapsed onto the wet ground with a heavy thud, his katana clattering beside him. Ryan panted, dropping to one knee beside Kato's body to check. The Yakuza boss was dead, his black eyes now lifeless in the rain. The alliance with Raul had ended in fire and blood, but his wounds were severe. His shoulder and chest were bleeding profusely, and his vision was blurring from blood loss and the stinging rain. He escaped through the smoldering cherry blossom garden, where flames licked at the pale pink branches, causing petals to fall like drops of blood. Black smoke billowed, covering his retreat. Logan called, "You did it. I hacked the cameras they're pulling back. Get on a flight home." Ryan dragged himself to the main road and hailed a taxi to Narita Airport in the relentless drizzle. He hastily bandaged his wounds with a scarf from his suitcase, blood soaking the back seat. On the covert flight back to Chicago, he received a text from Logan. New mission. Nepal. You ready? The CIA is calling. Ryan stared out the plane window at the dark clouds swirling below the wings, his heart heavy. He'd ended Kato, but the darkness never truly ended. In Tokyo, smoke still rose from the stronghold like a curse, and Ryan knew that this brand of justice was a never-ending cycle. The Chicago moonlight shone through the airplane window as Ryan Whitaker landed at O'Hare Airport at midnight. The frigid winter air hit his face like a familiar blade, carrying the salty smell of Lake Michigan and the distant fumes of the highway. The wounds from his fight with Hiroshi Kato in Tokyo were still bleeding profusely through the makeshift bandages wrapped around his shoulder and chest, throbbing with every movement, the blood staining his tattered, light grey shirt was a stark reminder of the sharp katana in the rain. Logan Pierce was waiting for him in the parking garage with a new pickup truck, his face pale under the airport's neon lights, still limping from his own warehouse injury. You did it. My friend, Kato's dead. The Yakuza's alliance with Raul is shattered. But the CIA called new mission in Nepal. Arms trafficking across the Indian border. Ryan got in the truck, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and blood loss. I know, but I'm going to the motel first. Family first. Logan nodded, hitting the gas and speeding into the night. Grayson's waiting there. He'll patch you up. And Raul's still alive, hiding out in Mexico City. He'll want revenge. The pickup truck roared down the I-90 expressway, the city's neon lights blurring into ghostly streaks. The whistle of the wind through a cracked window mingled with the sound of a sad jazz tune from a local radio station. Ryan stared out at Lake Michigan glittering under the moon, his mind reeling with flashbacks of the entire journey. From the sound of glass shattering late at night in his suburban home, the two Mexican robbers with venomous snake tattoos, to Harper's lost silver bracelet that had plunged him into this vortex, the fight on the subway, the blood-stained card leading to Raul Mendoza's brother, the fire that burned the Cartel's stash house on the south side, the breathless car chase on the highway, the infiltration of the Mexico City villa, the blood on the desert mountain roads, the warehouse melee with Grayson and Logan, the explosion of mines and the pile of bodies, the FBI interrogation, the confession to Ava, and the climax in the Tokyo cherry blossom garden. Kato's katana clashing with his dagger in the rain, From a petty robbery to a global war, Ryan whispered, his hand touching the faint scar on his arm from the Osaka mission 2 decades ago. He'd spared Kato's life for the sake of justice information that had saved his comrades, but now that justice had returned like a blood-soaked boomerang. The cheap motel on the outskirts of Chicago appeared under the silver moonlight. The tattered curtains of room number 7 fluttered in the lake breeze, and the smell of mildew and cold coffee wafted from the dark hallway. Grayson was waiting outside the door. The silver-haired old man with a sturdy frame holding a worn-out military medic bag. His grey-blue eyes glinted under the dim yellow porch light. "Son, you look like you've been through hell. Get inside. I'll patch you up." Ryan gave his father a brief hug. The familiar scent of old cigars on the old man's jacket like a memory from Vietnam. "Thanks, Dad. Without you and Logan, I'd have died in that warehouse." Grayson clapped his son on the shoulder, his calloused hands squeezing tight. "Old Ginger is still the spiciest. Now get some rest. Ava and the kids are waiting." Ryan pushed the door open. The warm yellow light of a table lamp illuminated Ava's pale face. She rushed to him, hugging him so tightly it was hard to breathe, tears streaming down her plump cheeks. "You're home!" "Blood. The wounds from Japan. I was so scared." "Ryan, don't go again." He held his wife, inhaling the familiar scent of soap in her hair, his deep voice laced with pain. "I promise. My love. Kato's dead. The alliance is broken. We're safe now." Noah stood in the corner of the room, a lanky 16-year-old with messy hair. His anger had subsided, replaced by wide-eyed admiration in his grey eyes, so much like his father's. "Dad, did you really beat a Yakuza boss? I saw it online, the fire in Tokyo. They're saying it was an underworld war." Harper squealed with joy from the small bed, jumping into her father's arms with a new, clumsily drawn picture. "Daddy, I drew you fighting the Japanese monster. See, you're holding a big sword, and the monster has a dragon on its back." Ryan knelt, pulling his daughter into a hug, looking at the drawing of a hero with a katana slaying a fire-breathing dragon. "Thank you, Harper. Daddy's a hero for you and Mom. I'm home for good now." Under the moonlight filtering through the torn curtains, the family huddled together on the old motel bed. Ava cleaned his wounds with a fresh cloth. Grayson told Noah stories about Vietnam in his raspy voice, and Harper snuggled against her dad's chest, falling asleep with a smile. Those moments of humanity, the sound of Noah's laughter drowning out the wind from the lake, Ava whispering "I love you" in his ear, the warmth of his family chasing away the metallic scent of blood from Tokyo, made Ryan promise to himself, "I will protect you all forever. No darkness will ever touch you." But that promise was as fragile as the crescent moon. His encrypted phone vibrated gently in his pocket, the screen flashing with a message from his CIA handler. "New mission, Nepal. Arms trafficking on the India-Nepal border. Connected to Raoul's remnants. You ready?" "Grey Ghost?" Ryan stared at the message, his heart feeling as heavy as lead. Memories of the entire journey flooded back, like a movie on fast forward. The sound of shattering glass that first night, the blood on the subway, the Cartel warehouse fire, the desert car chase in Mexico, the warehouse melee with its exploding mines and internal betrayal, the FBI interrogation, the confession to Ava under the motel sun, and Kato's katana piercing his chest in the Tokyo rain. From a small robbery over Harper's bracelet, he had burned down the Los Lobos and Yakuza empires. But undercover justice has no end. It's a never-ending cycle, where each shadow gives birth to a new one. "I choose justice," Ryan whispered, deleting the message but knowing he would call back. He couldn't be a normal father anymore. The past had marked him with scars and blood. Grayson clapped his son on the shoulder as the family slept soundly. "Son, you're just like me. You choose this life. Loneliness is the price you pay. But family, they're your anchor. Ryan nodded, holding a sleeping Harper in his arms. Watching Ava curled up beside them with a peaceful smile, he stepped out into the dark motel courtyard. The wind from the lake whipped at his face. Bitingly cold, he lit the last cigarette from the pack of cigars Grayson had given him. White smoke drifting lazily under a silver moon that glittered on the distant Lake Michigan. The cigarette glowed red in the night as Ryan took a deep drag, the bitter taste mixing with the salty smell of the lake in his throat. I beat Kato. Raoul's running scared. But Nepal. That's a whole new kind of darkness. He looked up at the crescent moon as memories flashed. Blood on the sands of Syria. A dagger in Baghdad. A katana in Tokyo, all for justice. But the cost was sleepless nights next to his family. And empty promises of forever. Noah woke up and walked out onto the courtyard, rubbing his eyes. Dad, please don't go again. Okay? I'm scared I'll lose you. Ryan stubbed out the cigarette and hugged his son. I promise. But if the darkness comes, I'll beat it. For you, your mom, and your sister. Noah nodded, his eyes shimmering under the moonlight. I'm going to be just like you. Dad. A hero. Ryan went back into the room and lay down beside Ava under the thin motel blanket, his wife's warmth soothing the ache of his wounds. But sleep wouldn't come. The CIA's offer echoed in his mind like a curse. Nepal. Weapons. A new darkness. He had chosen covert justice over a normal life, knowing that freedom came at the cost of eternal loneliness. The next morning, Chicago awoke to a weak sun shining over the lake. The family ate a motel breakfast of toast and coffee, Harper's laughter ringing out over the winter wind. Ryan played catch with Noah in the courtyard, teaching him basic evasive moves. Stay calm. Ande. Strike only when you have to. Ava smiled from the window. You're an amazing father. But deep down, Ryan knew the darkness never ends. Raoul was still alive. Remnants of the Yakuza were in hiding, and Nepal was calling like a deathly whisper. The ending is open-ended. With Ryan smoking in the motel courtyard at dusk, the smoke curling under a new moon. Ready for the next shadow, a new hunt on the Himalayan frontier, where covert justice awaits with daggers and guns. He watched his family through the warm window, his heart aching. The price of freedom is a collection of broken promises. The lake wind howled, carrying a tragic echo. He was a hero. But heroes never get to rest. Would Nepal be the end? Or would the cycle of blood and fire continue? Devouring these last few moments of peace, under the Chicago moonlight, Ryan crushed the cigarette butt and stepped into the darkness ready.